In 2019, UNESCO published a paper on why they believe feminized AIs will reinforce female gender stereotypes. The paper is interestingly titled, "I'd Blush If I Could." It should be coming up. As you can see, this is a very interesting title. If you flick through the paper, you'll realize where the sentence comes from. It's a response from Siri to verbal harassment from the user. The paper also includes a chart comparing how different voice assistants respond to verbal harassment differently. One harm that the paper outlined is that tolerance of sexual harassment and abuse does not insist on healthy communication about sexual content, and therefore reinforces gender tropes. But before negating female voice assistant completely, they look at the reason why they're gendered this way. And it turned out that voice assistants are mostly female because most people prefer female voices over male voices, especially in commercial contexts. Moreover, people would like to hear a male voice making authoritative statements, whereas a female voice providing assistance. This protest catalyzes feminists in using this as a call for change, and fittingly enough, 3 changes did happen in the industry. 1, all those flirtatious responses were removed permanently from the databases. 2, most companies now offer choices between male voices and female voices at the setup stage of their device. And 3, some companies aid themselves with degenderization. They've started developing genderless AI, a famous example being Q, a voice assistant with a gender-neutral voice. This is not the first gunshot we've heard. The war between humans and gender stereotypes has been brewing for centuries. It's usually more intense than this, but for the time being, please feel free to think about genderization as painting these graffitis and degenderization as removing them. Since long ago, we've linked lifeless objects with gender traits. We've done it with toys, ships, and most shockingly, numbers as well. Researchers have discovered that odd numbers are associated with masculinity and even numbers are associated with femininity. Crazy, right? On the other hand, the trend of degenderization has been about dissociating objects from genders to try to erase historically established gender traits. It's happening on clothes, restrooms, and ID cards. If you've been following the news, you might already know that recently, the Church of England initiated a conversation on the use of gender-neutral terms to refer to God. So we'll focus on attaching no specific genders to AI, help achieve the gender inequality we need. Well, as a technological determinist, I struggled to answer this question. I believed that with the aid of technology, we'll be able to solve any existing social problems, especially discrimination and gender inequality. Because when technology gets so advanced that people can customize their bodies freely and break through their biological limits, gender would no longer exist. When we have a safe way to artificially reproduce, who even needs gender at all? But this paper by UNESCO got me trapped in a paradox about the relationship between females and AIs. I call it the virtual female paradox. Technology first appeared as a savior to human females. It is, in fact, often discussed that the invention of the washing machine was the first step in achieving gender equality with technology, as it liberated females from the heaviest domestic task at the time, hand washing. The concept of artificial intelligence was already created at the time, and female AI's characters would appear as robot maids on screens. They master every kind of housework you can think of, and the fictional human female would be at rest. But here comes the paradox. Virtual voice assistants are one of the closest things we have to those robots here on Earth. They should be liberating human females as well. They certainly don't have a physical body, but they can talk and provide emotional support at least. But instead of liberating females, they seem to be making our lives harder by adding to the symbolic responsibility that human females have to bear, by setting out what is required to be female. Sorry, wait. when technology is seen as a tool that's distant from the human females, it seems to be liberating us. But when it gets closer, when it tries to replicate females, it makes our lives harder. To solve this problem, UNESCO apparently stands on the side of degenderization, that is, to increase the distance between humans and AIs. However, I don't think it's that simple. The problem gets revealed when we take this all the way back to the beginning, to the reasoning behind thinking of it as female. Before UNESCO published this paper, only Microsoft claimed that Cortana is female. All the other companies hadn't addressed this issue at all. They only gave their creation a feminine name and a default feminine voice. And that has made some users and UNESCO think they're females. So they say the responses reinforce female gender stereotypes. But what if they respond with the same answers in a male voice or gender-neutral voice? We would, of course, still consider the user's act as harassment, but would we say that the responses reinforce male stereotypes or gender-neutral stereotypes? No, because we don't consider those responses as stereotypes of them. No matter what pitch their voices, they're all victims of harassment, but we would only consider the harm when it's done to females. I find this particularly weird and interesting because we are more certain that they're females based on the way they responded. They're not oppressed because they're females. They become females because they're oppressed. We work backwards, and we work like this because deep inside we associate their responses with what we categorize as females, and being more likely to be harassed is one of them. We still can't get rid of the frame in thinking that one being a female means they must be victims of the patriarchy. Therefore, we try to erase traits on them that make people associate them with femininity. And this worries me because deep inside, I believe that it won't help us in the long term. Ideally, we want to stop harassment from happening to anyone. However, it will always happen, no matter what the voice assistants sound like. Only the wording changes, because it's in the majority's human nature to seek for something that pacifies us when we feel frustrated. I'll explain this more with an analogy. Imagine Cardiff Sixth Form canteen filled with teenagers starved without the company of a chef or a teacher. Certainly not an environment I want to be in, but before they start munching on each other, someone must stand up and start to cook for themselves, or even better, cook for others. But in reality, no one wants to move. They just sit there and think to themselves, it would be so nice if someone never gets hungry so that they continuously cook for us. Well, what they do, some of them pick out people that seemed weaker and have worked less and demand them to cook. Of course, there will be complaints saying, no, it's so unfair, I don't want to cook for you. But the people, they will argue back by saying, no, you shouldn't feel hungry at all because you haven't worked as much as we did. Over time, the people who demanded will agree on one thing, that is, by objecting people into cooking machines, and to do that, they tell people that they shouldn't feel hungry, they can get food whenever they want. Well, I hope you can spot a link between the story and the real world by now. Apparently, such a thing is called a master chef competition in this school. Apparently, people now are not only required to cook, but also put into a competition. Whoa, humans, evil humans. Never mind. The real link that I want you to focus on is that hunger is frustration and food is specification. In the analogy, people objectify others into cooking machines by neglecting their hunger. In reality, the same objectification happens to people who are told that they're not supposed to show frustration. In the past, who was considered to be working less? The majority of women. Who were considered to be working more? The majority of men. Everything should fall into place now. The key behind the gender inequality and the patriarchy we see today is actually the way the social responsibilities were divided in the past. This served as a reason behind objectification of females, which led to a vicious cycle of women feeling less and less involved in society and more like a victim. And to this day, we still do. We would think, it must have happened to me because I'm female. It must have happened to them because they are female. They would never have spoken to me like that if I weren't female. It took us so long to realize that we are entitled to show frustration and seek comfort too. In the modern world, as women start to participate in the society extensively, they feel more able to show frustration. They call for pacification too by seeking for traits that we associate with maternity. So the challenge has now turned into a whole society seeking for this absolute maternity. But it's become even more difficult as no one bears the responsibility of providing that anymore. In fact, I believe that no one has been or ever will be able to bear it. Femininity and masculinity, for centuries, people have been debating over what they mean and failed to come to a common conclusion. Everyone has a different definition for them because, after all, they're just collections of many good symbolic traits that no human has ever been able to adapt to. And yet, we struggle because this patriarchal system forces us to compete with those. Women are expected to become more feminine and men more masculine. Degenderization is a futile device we invented in this struggle to create this illusion that we're escaping these symbolic standards. It is futile because masculinity and femininity has nothing to do with genders after all. They're merely symbolic metrics that we use against each other. And that's where AI comes into play. Remember how people objectify others into cooking machines? They wouldn't have to do the same if they had machines in the first place. Machines that talk and provide emotional support. Isn't it great that we have them now? If we agree that femininity and masculinity are merely symbols that we can't find on humans, how about we project them onto AIs, as they are symbolic beings as well? Putting genders on AIs only make them more humane. It fits them into a social structure that humans have become so accustomed to. But we have to truly realize that AIs, they're completely different from humans. So separated, so detached. AIs are entirely other pair of genders, two virtual genders that both men and women are involved in defining and shaping. And in such ways, as we turn to those, we'll draw our attention away from doing the same to other humans. Therefore, I believe by creating AIs in both male and female gender and other genders and providing them to all humans, we'll find a mirror to our true desires and reflect what has been done wrong in history. However, I'm aware that implementing what I've just said might cause another social problem. Although the problem between women and technology has been resolved, we'll see an increasing distance between men and women in society as we turn to those virtual genders. As we put all of our energy onto an object that fills our needs and its relationship with us, we'll turn away from humans in reality. And those objects will finally be turned into commodities that are traded. Will this drag us all into consumerism at the end? Maybe a better way to do this is to put random traits onto gendered AI so that they're not stereotypical, but pure reflections of humans. But when technology has evolved to a stage where we can create AIs exactly like us, my entire anthropocentric speech shall be neglected completely. But at the very least, I hope that what I've said today will make you rethink about this trend of degenderization and the potential opportunity we have abandoned in erasing genders from AIs. Building AIs are like creating a technological self-portrait. It might not show what we truly are, but it does show what we want to be. And if all it does is just to reflect our dreams, using some bold colors isn't much of a problem, is it? Thank you.